Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly online Dhamma group where we read together Buddhist texts. We are happy to be joined by Venerable Dhamma, who is, as usual, gonna accompany us in the study of what we are currently reading. And he is currently residing in Sri Lanka at the Meditation Center. Today we will continue with the commentary of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta by the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And after 1 hour of reading, there will be the chance for asking questions and discussions about the text we read today. Before we begin, we will take together the 5 precepts, and everyone is welcome to join us in this wholesome deed and recite, even though if we can't hear you. Is there someone in the Discord reading group who would like to lead the precepts for us?
I would like to.
Thank you, Sanda.
Aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Dutiyampi aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Saranagamanang nititang.
Ama bante.
Anatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu michhachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumichachara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya maja pamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibuting yanti, tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
We're currently at the section which is talking about right effort, with the title The Path Factor of Right Effort. And before we start reading, please remember to read 2 paragraphs each, except if it's very short, then you can read one more. And to take pauses between each paragraph, so we have time for asking questions or Bante can explain something. The paragraph where we starts with regarding the effort to dispel and overcome evil. And post the reading list now. And we will continue with the next personal line from last time. So that would be today, you, Mila. Could you start first, please? Mila, are you there?
Yes. Apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Regarding the effort to dispel and overcome evil, unwholesome states that have already arisen, these are of 2 kinds. Unwholesome deeds or speech, such as killing, stealing, or lying, that one may have already committed, vitikkamma akusala, and arisen unwholesome thoughts, pariyatthana akusala, of anger or sensual desires. Latent unwholesome states, anusaya akusala, that have not yet arisen, but which will arise when the conditions are ripe.
I have a suspicion that there's a translation problem here, because that's not 2, that's 3. So I think one of 2, I might be wrong. It may be correct, in which case I'm not clear whether the Venerable Sayadaw maybe misspoke, or I'm not sure what's happening here, but there's something odd, or I'm just not understanding it correctly. That's also possible. Because there's a list of 3 here. That's a very well-known list of 3 types of akusala. And the delineation is this. The first is those which have expressed themselves externally. So when you say something unwholesome or you do something unwholesome based on unwholesome thoughts, unwholesome states of mind, they're expressed externally. Those are called vitikkamma akusala. So they're not just unwholesome. You actually did something and it was observable. Even if it's just getting very tense or red in the face because you're very angry, it expresses itself physically or verbally. Pariyuttana akusala is mental. It hasn't expressed itself, but it has arisen. So you're angry in the mind, or you're greedy in the mind, or you're confused or deluded, conceited, arrogant, whatever in the mind. That's unwholesomeness called pariyuttana akusala. It has arisen, but it hasn't expressed itself to others yet. It's in the mind. And the third is the potential. Latent anusaya means literally that which lies under, lies, that which is still dormant, sleeping. So it hasn't arisen yet, but it's the potential. And why this is important is because everyone can go moments without having any defilements in their mind at all. That's just how the mind works. Many moments in everyone's lives are going to be completely pure, as in free from defilement. But you can't say that that person is free from defilement because they still have the potential, meaning anytime there arises something that could trigger greed, anger, or delusion, they will be triggered. And the difference between that and an arahant is an arahant, at the moment of the triggering, at the arising of that which would trigger them, they're not triggered. So there's no potential for the arising of defilement. So these are called latent defilements, or unarisen, that unenlightened people have even when they are pure in their mind states. So this is also why purification of mind, citta visuddhi, is only the very early a part of the path. And that's important because, practically speaking, lots of people who practice meditation think they've gained some level of enlightenment, do think that they've attained some level of enlightenment because their mind is pure in that moment. But even someone who has entered into great states of calm and tranquility, what we call samatha meditation, still has anusaya kilesa. It means no kilesa are arising, no akusala, no unwholesomeness, no defilement, nothing is arising in their mind because their mind is so fixed and focused in tranquility meditation. But anytime they stop practicing or anytime they're distracted and triggered by something, greed, anger, and delusion can still arise. This is why in other religions and other spiritual practices, spiritual people can engage in unwholesome deeds, even though they are deeply invested in the practice of meditation. It's why also in Buddhism this happens. People who practice samatha meditation can still have wrong view and can still engage in great unwholesomeness, because they still have the anusaya akusala. So either it's supposed to say three kinds, because there's clearly three kinds, or there's something else going on here, that the first two are the only two that have actually arisen. So latent anusaya akusala haven't arisen, and he says that. So can you really call that? Can you really refer to that under the effort to dispel? Just to back up a little bit, we're talking about right effort, and there are four types of right effort. The first two are regarding unwholesomeness. You can read in the quote that we read last week. It's just above this. Those that haven't, those unwholesome states that haven't arisen, you strive for their non-arising. If they haven't arisen, you work so that they don't arise. And if they've already arisen, you work so that they will cease, so that they will fade away. But anusaya kilesa haven't arisen. So I'm not sure why it's not presented in the paragraph before, why it's not presented in the effort to prevent unarisen unwholesome states from arising. And the way you prevent anusaya from arising is, as he says in the next paragraph, the paragraph that we haven't yet read, is through the practice of satipatthana vipassana. And when you reach the stages of enlightenment, magga and phala, then the potential, the anusaya, are cut off, but only then. So I'm not sure how you could call those unwholesome states that have already arisen, because by very definition, they're those that have not yet arisen. Something's going on here, but just to we don't have to worry too much about the nature of the text. Let's just be clear about what we're talking about. There's these three types. Two of them have already arisen, And so you would work through mindfulness to note the mental states. The physical states, there's nothing you can do about them. You have to acknowledge and work to correct, so that in the future you are not prone to wrong speech and wrong action. But the anusaya is only through payment of the path, which he's going to explain. Yeah, so we're talking about the 4 types of effort. That's all you need to know, and that there are these 3 types of akusala, 2 of which have arisen, 1 of which hasn't yet arisen, as he says. But just don't be confused. I'm not really sure what the 2 kinds here are referring to, but we don't really have to worry about that. It's not really important.
Of these 2 kinds, unwholesome deeds and speech are dispelled by moral training. Meticulous observance of the precepts automatically dispels evil deeds and speech. Evil thoughts of anger or sensual desire are dispelled by concentration and insight meditation. Latent defilements may be momentarily dispelled by insight meditation. They can be entirely rooted out only when the knowledge of the noble path is attained. It is with a view to completely uprooting latent defilements that insight meditation should be practiced. This point is subtle and profound and can be fully grasped only by those who have practiced insight meditation effectively and adequately.
So you're not really dispelling latent defilements. Dormant defilements might be a better translation, because they're dormant, they haven't arisen. I don't know, latent, maybe latent is fine. It's just not a word I'm that comfortable with. Maybe it's fine. So they're not really dispelled, but they're prevented. They are inhibited, you could say. When you practice mindfulness, normally you'd be triggered by things. When you feel pain, you might be triggered by disliking of the pain. But if you note the pain, you inhibit the potential, the latent defilements, the dormant defilements. You prevent them from arising. Prevent them from becoming pariyutthana in the mind.
The effort to rouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen means that one should, to the best of one's ability, perform meritorious deeds that one has not done yet. Giving alms, dana, undertaking and observing precepts, the practice of tranquility meditation, and the practice of insight meditation are all meritorious deeds. Some distort the true teaching of the Buddha by teaching that meritorious deeds will prolong the cycle of existences. According to them, meritorious deeds are volitional actions, sankhara, which are conditioned by ignorance, avijja. The law of dependent origination says, conditioned by volitional actions, rebirth, consciousness arises. Sankhara pacaya vijnanang. Therefore, according to them, meritorious deeds, kusala sankhara, will cause the arising of rebirth consciousness, so they must be abandoned. Such an assertion contradicts the true meaning of the Buddha's teaching and is very misleading. In fact, if meritorious deeds were to be given up, one would be left entirely with demeritorious deeds, which would not only prolong the cycle of existences, but would surely lead to the four lower realms. The real cause of the ceaseless rounds of rebirth is rooted in the defilements of ignorance and craving. These defilements can be removed by meritorious deeds, which should therefore be performed with a view to eradicating these defilements.
Yeah, so what he's I think this is a fairly niche view, probably specific to people who are very well versed in the texts, in the theory of Buddhism, like in Buddhist societies like Myanmar. It's the kind of thing that could arise in communities. I've seen communities with very strange views based on a lot of study. But what's being said here is that in Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, which is a very core Buddhist doctrine, avidya, ignorance, leads to sankhara. Now, sankhara means karma, actions that you perform, and those are both meritorious, good deeds and bad deeds. So you have good intentions and bad intentions, and that is caused by avidya. Because of ignorance, you do things good and bad. You incline towards things, and because of that, you're reborn. So by doing good deeds, you're reborn in heaven. By doing bad deeds, you're reborn in hell, and generally are born basically due to mixed karma, because we all perform some good and some bad. But that's only just telling the story of how we come to be where we are, and us being born as humans is because we've done good deeds, and it's a abbreviation of the rest of Paticca Samuppada. So the rest of it explains how this happens on a moment-to-moment basis. You see something or hear something or experience something, and then there's a pleasant feeling or a painful feeling, and then you cling to it and you intend to do something based on it and so on. But the reason why it works like that is because your deeds only have results, karmic results, if there is ignorance. So it doesn't mean that arahants don't perform deeds. Enlightened beings like the Buddha didn't perform deeds. The Buddha was constantly performing good deeds because his mind was pure. But those good deeds were not karmically potent. It means because there was no ignorance in his mind, the good deeds had no attachment, had no desire for future rebirth, had no volition or wish for some result. He was not doing them hoping for some result or intending for there to be some good result based on those good deeds. That's all that means. It doesn't mean that he didn't do good deeds. In fact, the further you go on the path, the more inclined and the more intent you are on even ordinary good deeds of keeping precepts and giving charity and the practice of tranquility and insight meditation. So two things we can say is one, this kind of view is wrong, and this confusion over what is being said in Paticca Samuppada has to be understood, has to be explained away. You have to explain why is it wrong to say that doing good deeds is bad, or doing good deeds is based on ignorance. It's that if there is ignorance, then those good deeds that you do will still be productive of future rebirth. But as the Mahasi Sayadaw says, once there's no ignorance, then the good deeds are, I mean, they're never wrong in the first place. Even done with ignorance, they're not wrong, they're not bad. They're just going to dictate how you're reborn based on your craving. You still crave to be reborn, but because of the good deeds, it has affected that, and you're reborn conditioned by those good deeds instead of being conditioned by the bad deeds that you've done. So you could say that good deeds are not the path to enlightenment, and they're in some ways, or they're not necessary. But this Paticca doesn't say anything about them being supportive. So the other thing you can say and should say is that good deeds are, practically speaking, essential. As the Mahasi Sayadaw says, if you don't do good deeds, and he says this in other talks that he gives as well, I think, if you don't do good deeds, then all the bad deeds have an opportunity to arise. Doing good deeds is a way to live your life, protecting yourself against the potential for committing all sorts of evil deeds. Anytime you're intent or engaged in the pursuit of goodness, whether it be worldly or spiritual, you're protecting yourself against the potential to do evil. So it's a huge part of Buddhist practice. You see in Buddhist cultures around the world, people intent upon finding ways to perform wholesomeness in their lives. It's a great protection and a great support for the practice, and you can't refer to Paticca as a means of negating that or refuting that. Because clearly in many places the Buddha has said that doing good deeds is good. And you can see for yourself that they are incredibly supportive of the practice.
And in the last sentence, he says that you should do good deeds with the intention, as far as I understand it, with the intention for attaining Nibbana or eradicating all the defilements. How would you put that into practice? Because I heard also that you should try to remember every time you do something good to direct this good deed towards the goal, that you in your mind wish that by this good deed I find the goal. But what if you forget this? What if you naturally are inclined to do good things and don't really think about it?
Well, you're more likely to be reborn in heaven or so on. But because you're not thinking about it means you're not being mindful. You're more likely to be reborn. That's all. It's not that good deeds are problematic. It's that if you're intent on doing deeds at all and not cultivating mindfulness, then you're not going to attain the goal, and you're going to be reborn. And your rebirth will be based on those karmas. So you did a lot of good deeds, you'll be reborn in heaven. But someone who is mindful is naturally inclined towards doing everything they do being conducive for freedom from suffering or freedom from defilement. Even intellectually, someone who is practicing and who sees the greed and anger and delusion in their minds will think about the good deeds that they could do as a support for their practice. What if I do all these good deeds? That would be a support to make my practice better. I mean, that's not the wisdom talking. It's a sort of a worldly or an intellectual sort of wisdom, but it's valuable. It's profitable to say to yourself, I should be doing what good deeds are there that I can do. But through wisdom, one is naturally inclined towards doing good deeds. One might, during their practice, might acknowledge that they have greed and think, well, I should if the opportunity arises to give something and they don't want to, they think, aha, here's some stinginess or this person has asked me to help them and I'm not going to help them. So that would cause me to suffer if I gave, and they think, oh, here, this is attachment, so it'd be good if I give like that. It doesn't have to, it isn't necessarily even so explicit as in terms of the arising of a thought, but the inclination to do things that are going to support your practice, and as opposed to doing things that are going to increase your worldly pleasure, worldly comfort.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Bhante.
And likewise, like, if I kill this mosquito, it will be to my comfort, but I won't do that. Because keeping ethical precepts is a good deed as well. I think that's a pretty glaringly obvious one, that someone who is mindful thinks that way, thinks, oh no, I could never engage in harming other beings. That would increase the anger that I have. And that would be a true detriment to my spiritual welfare.
A simple meritorious deed can lead to rebirth in a fortunate abode, sukhati, whereas Dhamma can be studied and practiced to become a noble one, thus escaping from the suffering of the lower realms and the endless cycle of existence. The story of the frog deity serves to illustrate this point.
Okay, I think this is another mistranslation. This was all translated. The Mahasi Sayadaw didn't teach this in English. It should be where Dhamma can be studied, which is kind of important, I think. Like, it also makes sense the way it's presented here, but I don't think that's what it's saying, especially in relation to the frog deity. So we'll learn about the frog in the next paragraph. I won't go into detail about that, but I think what is being said here is not what's being presented in English. So you do simple meritorious deeds. They're not even the practice of mindfulness. They're not the cultivation of the Buddha's teaching, but those deeds are practically potentially helpful. It's not a reassured. It's not a sure thing. But by being reborn in Sugati means heaven, or at least as a human. Being born as a human is considered a fortunate abode, a Sugati, where you can practice the Dhamma. Because if you're born as a frog, obviously you can't study and practice the Dhamma. It's not whereas there, it's where. So, and this is important. I've had arguments with people who say being reborn in heaven is a bad thing. Now, being born as a human again is already a sugati, so it's also very good. But being born in heaven is also very good. And time and again, the Buddha pointed out the goodness of well, not the goodness, but that heaven is something that is a preferred outcome. And it's not something to be afraid of. In some ways, being born a human is much scarier than being born as a deva, right? And you shouldn't feel ashamed of the idea of being born in heaven. What we don't want is for that to be it shouldn't be the goal of your practice. You shouldn't be doing good deeds only for the purpose of being reborn in heaven. Excuse me.
Bhante, actually, in the previous translation or version we read, it says where Dhamma can be heard, not whereas Dhamma.
So it may be this this translator who is. It could even be an agenda. I don't want to, but there is an agenda sometimes where people don't like this idea and they think, oh, it must not mean that, because I've been telling people that being reborn in heaven is not a good thing. And they think, oh, he must be saying that these simple meritorious deeds are inferior because they only lead to rebirth in Sukati. Whereas, if you do the good deed of practicing Dhamma, no, that's not what it's saying. And we can see that because of the frog deity story. It's making the point that's going to be shown in the next paragraph. So let's read the next paragraph.
The frog deity was a frog in his previous existence when he happened to hear a discourse given by the Blessed One. Without understanding a word of the discourse, the frog listened to it with respectful attention and devotion, for which meritorious deed he was born in the Dewa realm. As a Dewa, he gained the opportunity of listening to the Buddha's teaching again, by virtue of which he attained the stage of a stream winner.
There you go. It's clear that that's what he's trying to say. That you never know. The good deeds that you do now might set you up perfectly, as they did with countless number of devas in the time of the Buddha. The number of devas who were able to hear the Buddha's teaching and become at least Sotapanna, at least. I have records of this and have confirmation that this was a very easy way to gain insight into reality. Become a deva, listen to the Buddha's teaching, and have the luxury of taking all your time to study it. I mean, imagine being born in heaven where you don't have to get a job, you don't get sick, you don't have to eat or drink, you don't have to worry about rent or loans or crime or poisonous animals, mosquitoes. You don't have to worry about any of those things. If you are inclined, you have the best opportunity to study the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. Of course, what people say is that in heaven, it's too easy to be caught up in the luxury of it, the pleasure of it, and that's certainly valid. It's quite likely that many devas are negligent because of how pleasant and comfortable they are in heaven. But it's like, is that really the worst possible? Is that really such a terrible state to be in when you compare it to humans who are alcoholics or murderers or thieves? You know how horrible human beings can be, and how many human beings who have no potential to ever come in contact with the Dhamma, let alone appreciate it. The number of people who would vilify the Dhamma. So these angels up in heaven who are negligent, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, sure, it's a real shame because they may never think to appreciate or practice the Buddha's teaching, but they could and they may. Why? Because they're good, they're not terrible. They're not murderers or thieves, they're not corrupt in mind. Yeah, they're kind of corrupt, but it's so that's bad. But it isn't the kind of bad where you think, oh, then being born a deva is dangerous. It's not really dangerous. It's so potentially beneficial, and there's such potential. And someone who here and now, like all of the people here, those listening on YouTube, those in our study group on Discord, all of us are inclined towards the Buddha's teaching. So if anyone here was born in heaven, there's no question that they would be quick to meet with other Buddhists in heavenly realms who are also inclined towards practicing the Dhamma and very easily progress and commit and dedicate themselves to the Buddha's teaching. Think how easy it would be. Seems like an ideal situation. And this, Mahasi Sayadaw says it here. right? He doesn't say whereas, he says where Dhamma can be studied and practiced to become a noble one. But that also includes the human realms. So remember, he's referring to a frog, and the frog couldn't even understand, obviously, what the Buddha was saying. So being born as a human, being born as a deva is a good thing. Doing good deeds is essential, because if you're not born as at least a human being, unless you're able to gain insight and progress on the path in this life as a human being, you better be sure you're going to have another chance, to be reborn as a human being or born in heaven, where you can continue to work towards the practice, towards the goal. So this story about the frog is actually a fairly well-known one. If you haven't heard this before, well, it's good that you've heard it, and know that this is a well-known story, and it's repeated by teachers in our tradition. One of the reasons for highlighting it is to appreciate the goodness of learning the Dhamma. So it's kind of a reassurance, like in a situation like this, where we all come together with wholesome intentions, with goodness in our hearts, to study and discuss the Dhamma. We shouldn't trivialize this opportunity and this practice. We should appreciate how great it is that we're here. Even frogs, even a frog who didn't understand the Buddha's teaching at all, was able to be reborn in heaven and become a Sotapanna by listening to the Buddha's teaching without understanding it. But we all understand what's being said. We're in a far better position from to this frog. The thing about the frog is that he was keen on listening. He was entranced by the sound of the Buddha's voice, and so his mind entered into a very pure state. So for all of us, most likely we're not in that sort of trance state when sitting here reading and listening and thinking about what the Mahasi Sayadaw is saying and what I'm saying and what we're all talking about. So it's important, most important thing for us to think about is to consider the state of our mind during this. You should be careful not to get distracted by entertainment. If you're tabbing into Facebook or something like that, just try and be careful that if you want this opportunity to bring fruit to its full potential, keep guard on your mind. Keep your mind in a state of wholesomeness and maintain the keen interest in learning about the Dhamma. And we can be like the frog, and at least, even if you don't gain deep insight into the Dhamma by sitting here studying with us, the goodness in your heart will surely lead you to be reborn and to be reborn in a situation where you're able to learn and practice the Buddha's teaching in the future, which is a good thing. One thing that Buddhists do to reaffirm this is when they perform good deeds, they will say, Nibbana Paccayo Hotu. Nibbana Paccayo Hotu. May this be a cause for Nibbana. May this be a support. May this be a condition support for Nibbana. Nibbana Pachayo Hotu. Common Buddhist phrase in Theravada Buddhism. You'll hear a Theravada Buddhist say this often. Nibbana Pachayo Hotu. So what that does is it isn't like a wish that you can make and suddenly it's granted and you become enlightened, but it creates this determination that will incline you towards being reborn and even in this life meeting with opportunities to practice the Buddha's teaching.
I just wanted to add to this that usually devas do remember their previous life. So if we imagine that the frog did remember that he has been like a frog, and what led him or them to be reborn as a deva, so that's that alone can be very propelling to seek out and listen to the Dhamma and listen to the Buddha again and try to understand it. And so if I imagine that I would remember my existence here, then it's super helpful, I think. So just this alone is,
as opposed to being born a human where you're likely to forget it all. No, the story does include that, actually. I don't know if you've read the story and you knew this, but there is an explanation that he was born as a deva, and he thought, what the heck? I'm a deva. I'm this angelic. What am I now? And he realizes, oh, I was a frog. And what happened was he was a frog, and near where the Buddha was teaching, and this hunter came by and saw the frog and stabbed it with a sharp stick to kill the frog because he was going to eat the frog or whatever. And so he died while listening to the Buddha's teaching. And he realized this, and he came down to see the Buddha, and he said, this is crazy, what happened? I was listening to you talk, and now I'm a deva. And the Buddha, I don't remember exactly this, but there's a teaching involved. And the Buddha says, yes, this is the case.
I actually remembered other different stories. Sorry, Bante. Yeah.
Thus, effort should be made to rouse any kind of wholesome states that have not yet arisen, especially the meritorious deeds that would lead to the noble path. Every time such an effort is made, one is developing the path factor of right effort. The effort to maintain wholesome states that have already arisen, not to let them fade away, but to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development, is plain enough. A meditator, noting everything at the moment of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or knowing, is making an effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising. It also means striving to remove the unwholesome states that have already arisen. At the same time, the meditator is striving to develop the higher wholesome deeds of insight and knowledge of the noble path, meritorious deeds that have not yet arisen. He or she is also striving to maintain and to bring to perfection the wholesome deeds of insight that have already arisen. Thus, every time one is noting each phenomenon as a meditation exercise, one is developing the path factor of right effort, or the enlightenment factors of the four right exertions, samma padana, which can be summarized as follows: the effort to prevent unarisen, unwholesome states from arising, the effort to dispel unwholesome states that have already arisen, the effort to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen, the effort to maintain, develop, and to bring to perfection wholesome states that have already arisen. These are called the four right exertions.
Every time one is engaged in the meritorious deeds of charity, morality, and meditation, one is developing the path factor of right effort, or the four right exertions. It is especially so when one performs these deeds with a view to escaping from the suffering of the cycle of existence. The meritorious deed of insight meditation is, needless to say, synonymous with the path factor of right effort. Striving to perform meritorious deeds is right effort. The path factor of right mindfulness. What, monks, is the path factor of right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk dwells contemplating the body as the body, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having overcome covetousness, abhijja, and sorrow, domanassa, for the world.
He dwells contemplating feelings as feelings, the mind as mind, mind objects as mind objects, ardent, clearly comprehending, and mindful, having overcome covetousness and sorrow for the world. This, monks, is called right mindfulness. These are the Buddha's words elaborating right mindfulness. Was the Noble Eightfold Path taught in detail? In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, as we find it today, the Eightfold Path is just mentioned in the form of headings. When this Dhammacakka discourse was first given by the Buddha, did the Venerable Kundana, together with the Brahmas and deities who attained to higher knowledge, then understand merely by the words right mindfulness that it meant the four foundations of mindfulness, by means of which the nature of the body, feelings, the mind, and mind objects are clearly comprehended? They also understand that noting every bodily action, every feeling, every mental phenomenon, every thought or mind object constitutes right mindfulness, and that this should be developed by noting every physical and mental phenomenon.
This is a moot point that needs to be pondered, for unless they had a clear comprehension about it, they would not be able to develop right mindfulness. In the absence of right mindfulness, attaining higher knowledge of the Noble Path and its fruition is impossible. Two considerations are possible here. The first one is that the Venerable Kondanya and the Brahmas and deities who were already fully ripe with unique perfections, parami, destined for final liberation, on just hearing the words right mindfulness, they at once understood that they should note every bodily action, etc., to develop the path factor of right mindfulness. They accordingly did so, and in this way attained higher knowledge.
Second consideration is that when the discourse was first given for clear understanding by his audience, the Blessed One elaborated the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path and expounded on the four foundations of mindfulness. However, at the time of the First Buddhist Council, when reciting the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Noble Eightfold Path as a component of the Four Noble Truths was condensed in the form of headings only, there being in existence expositions on them separately in other suttas being recited in condensed form at the first council. The answer is yes. The Satipatthana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya is a condensation of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, only the first portion of which was recited at the first council. However, at the proceedings of the Sixth Buddhist Council, the missing portions of the suttas have been filled in and recorded, although the latter portions of the sutta were not mentioned in the Majjhima Nikaya commentary. Similarly, some long suttas belonging to some other collections, Nikaya, were recorded in condensed form in the Khuddaka Nikaya.
So he's pointing out that the Buddha doesn't teach. I mean, isn't presented as actually teaching the four satipatthana, for example. So the question would arise: how did these monks, how were these ascetics able to practice mindfulness and become enlightened? But I mean, another point is, so these aren't two considerations; these are two potential answers for consideration. So he's giving two options. You could consider two possible things. You could consider two possible answers in regards to this. The first is that they were quite knowledgeable and didn't need to be taught in detail, and they were able to realize just from hearing rights, samma sati was enough for them to pick up the practice of sati. The other is that he did expound it, and what we have recorded is only a abridged version. And he points out how in the case of the Satipatthana Sutta and the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, which are two versions of the same sutta, in the Burmese Sixth Council, they decided to re-add the missing sections to the Majjhima Nikaya version. So if you look in the Burmese Tipitaka, you'll see, I think, that you'll see in the VRI version anyway, that the Digha Nikaya version and the Majjhima Nikaya version of the sutta are exactly the same, whereas in other versions they're not. It's missing the exposition of the Four Noble Truths. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, it would only say the Four Noble Truths are a part of Dhammanupassana, and so it enumerates the Four Noble Truths, but it doesn't go into detail as to the Four Noble Truths, I think, which includes a details about each of the Eightfold Noble Path as the fourth one, I think. A third option for consideration, or third factor to consider, is that, well, this sutta didn't actually lead to them all to become enlightened. So it's not necessary to say that they must have been given more due to their attainments, because they didn't attain anything. The only one to attain anything from this, the only one to attain enlightenment from this was Kondanya, and he became a Sotapanna, which I don't think for him requires deep and detailed exposition of right mindfulness. The very basic concepts of the Four Noble Truths is probably enough for that very, very special realization that no one else could ever hope to attain by hearing this sutta, or very few people anyway. And in fact, it's quite likely that either way, the Buddha did discuss the four Satipatthana with the monks in the next days, in the following days where they practiced together. They practiced for another 5 days, where the Buddha was teaching the Dhamma that we don't have record of, pointing things out and directing them to realize the Four Noble Truths for themselves, before giving the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, which was the second discourse 5 days later, at which point they were all Sotapanna. So they became Sotapanna not all from listening to this sutta, but from further instruction, which quite reasonably could have included a more detailed exposition of the four Satipatthana, among other things.
Okay, thank you, Bhante, very much for that explanation, and thank you everyone for reading today. We are over the hour, so we will stop for today. And we will move on to the Q&A. So I invite everyone to ask questions, especially meditation-related questions, and also questions about the text we read today, our readings. So we will shortly start with the Q&A when the questions are ready. And in the meantime, you can just stay mindful.
Bhante, the first question that we have: I've been reflecting that good and evil are just a thought away. Could you elaborate on this?
I don't know what you want me to say. Maybe if you have a more specific question.
Maybe they're scared about how easy it is to have evil thoughts.
That's true. I mean, I guess the idea behind it is that good and evil are not very special things that you do occasionally. They are moments, and they are constant. Good and evil are occurring moment by moment throughout our lives, throughout our daily lives. Not just when we kill or steal or lie or cheat or give charity or affirm our determination to keep the precepts or practice meditation. Those aren't the only times when good and evil arise. They're constantly arising. When you drive your car, when you walk down the street, when you click on a link to open a website, when you scroll on your phone, when you eat, when you drink. So yeah, I mean, I'm not criticizing what you said. I do have some things to say about it, I guess. I can say that about it. I mean, it's a good reflection that you have. I didn't mean to suggest it wasn't.
The next question, Bante. Could you please explain what mind objects are? Are these the six senses?
Right. So, the word mind object, or the term mind object, is way overused in the history of the discussion of the four foundations of mindfulness. It's very, very unlikely that it's a proper translation of the word Dhamma in the context of the four Satipatthana. The translation of Dhamma as mind objects works in a very, very, very specific instance of the usage of the word Dhamma. That is very, very, very unlikely what is meant by Dhammanupassana, the fourth Satipatthana. The object of, so with each type of experience, there is the subject and the object, the subject being the thing that experiences it, and the object being the thing that is experienced. So eye consciousness experiences light, you could say, or visions. Ear consciousness experiences sound. Nose consciousness experiences smell. Tongue consciousness experiences taste. Body consciousness experiences sensations. And mind consciousness, the object of mind consciousness means mental awareness of a mental activity, experiences what are called Dhammaramana, which you can translate as, I mean, it doesn't literally mean mind objects, but it's the object of mind consciousness, manovinyana. This is consciousness that's aware of a mental activity, a thought. Dhammaramana is thought. That's what mind object is. It refers specifically to that 12th item in this list of 12 things. The six senses, subject, object, subject, object. The last one is Dhammaramana. That's not what's being discussed in Dhammanupassana. So I can't but think that it's a mistranslation and problematic one too, because it became so popular. And so when people tried to explain what Dhamma means, that it means things that the mind takes as an object, which isn't very useful at all, because I mean, all things, the mind takes all things as an object. The first three are also objects of the mind, but they're not Dhamma ramana. And Dhamma nupassana, all of the things there, you can clearly see they're not all Dhamma ramana, Dhamma there. So Dhamma in the four Satipatthana more likely refers to teachings, because you can see as in contrast to the first three, it's much more focused on the Buddha's teaching and the path to enlightenment and a progression. So when you practice the first three Satipatthana, you are guided by the fourth Satipatthana. The first of the Dhammanupassana is the hindrances. You're guided by those being teachings. Not that the Buddha taught to develop them, but that the Buddha taught to catch them and to appreciate them as being hindrances. So of course, a new meditator starts by paying close attention to the five hindrances, because they're what makes your practice unpleasant, and what prevents your practice from progressing. And then you have the senses, the six senses, the five aggregates. These are ideas or teachings that are useful to know about and to apply mindfulness to. At least the six senses, they aren't in the first three. Knowing about the three senses is, knowing about the six senses is valuable. The five aggregates is a little more theoretical. Why? Because you're already practicing mindfulness of the five aggregates. The first three Satipatthana are basically, the four Satipatthana are basically the five aggregates anyway. But the five aggregates here is talking about how that's what makes up a being. So beings don't exist. There's only these five aggregates, and they're a conglomerate of things. And then the Bojjhangas and the path and the Eightfold Noble, or the truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. You can see this as talking about the path to enlightenment, basically, or realization that comes. So Dhamma as teaching is more useful. The word mind object, I'm not sure quite if that's what your question was referring to. What does the fourth Satipatthana mean? It most likely doesn't mean mind objects. That's not a really good translation of that, because the word Dhamma doesn't almost never means something like that, only in this very specific example.
It seems there are not many questions today, Bante.
We can sit quietly for some time, and if there aren't any, we can just go. Get in early. Usually when I say that, questions start coming in.
The next question that we have, Bante, During sitting meditation, often before pain, I experience a strong feeling of pressure from sitting. Can I note this pressure? It sometimes feels difficult to ignore when it becomes strong.
Yeah, but you shouldn't note it. You shouldn't try to note it until it goes away because it's physical. Not likely to just. It's not reliable that it will go away. So just note it a few times or until you feel like your mind has lost its obsession with it. And when the mind is more free to go back to the rising and falling, just go back to the rising and falling. You don't have to stay with it for a long time necessarily. Of course, if it's something you dislike or worried about or whatever, then yeah, you should note that as well.
The next question, Bante. How do I move on from my heartbreak? It's been many weeks. I have been crying in the shower, couldn't sleep, and have been going to school late. While I practice meditation, these feelings are still very real, and I find myself unable to observe them come and go.
Well, you're experiencing non-self. You're learning that they're not really your feelings. So the series of events that led to you coming here and asking this question, accompanied by the observations that you have of being unable to overcome them or fix them, or change them, is already a part of the healing. That this isn't static, and this is kind of the mistake that we make in thinking that things now, when we come to complain about something, not that you're really complaining, but it's kind of a complaint. It's not a bad thing. But when you get to the point where you're vocal about your observations that you've made, the idea that it's still the same problem, but it's actually not. By the time you get here, having gone through this period that you've realized that this is just completely uncontrollable, you've already learned something and you've already changed. You've already broadened your horizon because you've experienced suffering and you've come to appreciate the potential for suffering caused by craving and attachment. What you can do and what you have to do, you have to try your best to do, is to stop feeding. So the problem with what I've said is that it's not just a learning experience, it's also a feeding experience. So during all that time, there are moments where you have a decision to make. Am I going to feed this? It's not quite so conscious, but the decision, like a fork in the road, comes where you can feed it or you can be mindful of it, basically. Well, the other option is to fight it, you know. So you feed it by indulging yourself. Yes, I lost this thing that I loved. And you feed the feeling. The other is that you get upset about it. Why am I still harping on about this? Oh, I'm so useless. I can't get over this. Why can't I get over this? No. So you react to the reactions. You react to the state. Those are kind of, you could say, the two extremes. And mindfulness is the alternative, where you face the experience. And so this is what you have to do. Ultimately, you have to face the experience. Don't think of it in terms of how can I fix, how can I overcome. Think of it in terms of how can I face and learn and become familiar with these experiences so that they stop triggering me. Because that's what's happening. You're being triggered moment by moment. You're being triggered in the present. You're not being triggered by what happened in the past. The past, what happened in the past is gone. It's not affecting you. It's the moments of the present that are affecting you. The past is not affecting you. What's affecting you is these moments of memory, the habits, and the inclination of your mind to, whenever these thoughts arise, to think, oh yes, that thing in the past, to make a narrative out of it. That's wrong behavior. The wrong way of behaving towards it. When the thoughts arise, the memories arise, even the emotions arise, you've got to train yourself to face them, not to fix them, but to face them. When you learn to face them, you'll see how obnoxious they are, as you're seeing, how unwieldy, unmanageable they are. And it will change your perspective on not just the consequences of loss, but the consequences of clinging to something that can be lost. You're going to gain a much better perspective on attachment as a result of this, if you're mindful, if you'd stop feeding it, like if you can avoid feeding it, and if you could stay mindful. You're already doing, it sounds like you are meditating. Don't give that up. Don't be discouraged. Meditation isn't going to fix your problems. It's going to help you understand why they're problems and how you caused those problems, to give you a better perspective on problems, so that in the future you don't cause your problem. And you'll see it will work itself out. Not the way you want it, not when you want it to, or how you want it to, or because you say go away. It will work itself out over time. Unless you feed it, it will slowly fade away. And if you're mindful of it, it will reasonably quickly go away, because you'll get sick of it. You'll get tired of it. This is nibbida. Right now you're still in the bida part. You're not nibbida yet. Bida means you're attached to it. You're excited about it. You see again and again how this excitement is just stressing you out and tiring you out and worthless and useless. You'll get tired of it. You'll get nibbida. Mindfulness leads to that, leads you to get tired of this obsession, passion, attachment.
The next question, Bante. Can anger be considered as breaking the fourth precept because of angry words?
No. No. So the 5 precepts are pretty basic, and this is why, as we said, many Buddhists incline towards keeping the Ajivattamaka Sila, which includes making a vow to abstain from harsh speech. But that's not the 5 precepts. Oh, no, I guess the answer is depends on which precepts you're talking about. The 5 precepts, even the 8 precepts of a meditator, don't strictly speaking, involve abstaining from harsh speech. Now, practically speaking, if you're in a meditation center, you're expected to refrain from harsh speech, absolutely, and all kinds of bad speech. Even useless speech, you're expected to refrain from it, and you'll be reprimanded if you engage in useless speech too much. But they don't technically. So it's important to understand the 5 precepts, even the 8 precepts, are not the be-all, end-all of morality or ethics. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta goes further towards describing a framework of advanced Buddhist ethics, because it involves all 4 types of wrong speech, the abstention from all 4 types. But anger itself will never break the precepts, because anger is pariyuttana kilesa. It's arisen in the mind, but it hasn't expressed itself. The precepts only relate to those things, and sila in general only relates to those things that are expressions of unwholesomeness: killing, stealing, lying, cheating, actions and speech that have left the confines of the mind. So if you just get angry, you're never going to break a precept. If you speak angrily, harsh speech, then you've broken right speech. And if you're keeping the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, then you've broken those precepts. The precepts are just vows. They're not rules. They're not like things that others impose upon you. The 5 precepts are the precepts that you undertake. I undertake keep this precept. You're not keeping the 5 precepts, that's a problem, but those are pretty extreme.
Bante, the next question. Whenever problems arise, I find it very hard to meditate. The mind keeps going back to the issue. How do I overcome this? Do I distract the mind? Do I stop the meditation or just do other things?
No, you be mindful of the issue, Mind goes back to the issue. So there are going to be thoughts, there are going to be emotions, lots of things you can be mindful of. Finding it very hard to meditate is par for the course. Don't be surprised when it's difficult. Don't be discouraged when it's difficult. Don't expect it to be easy. It might be easy sometime, but being difficult isn't really a meaningful statement, in that it doesn't have a meaningful impact on the practice, because if it's difficult, you still have to do it. It's still the only way, and it's still doable. Not quickly, perhaps, but there are 4 types of practice. There's difficult practice with quick results, difficult practice with slow results, easy practice with quick results, and easy practice with easy practice with slow, easy practice with quick results. But easy practice can have slow results. Depends on the individual, depends on their practice. So difficult practice can be quickly fruitful, but slow or fast, it doesn't matter. Mostly we have difficult practice, slow result. That's the reality of our time. Don't be discouraged by that. That's par for the course. But yeah, you shouldn't So a few things. You should stop looking at things as problems. This is our ultimate goal, or not ultimate goal. This is a long-term goal, is to be determined to stop looking at things as problems. It being very hard is not a problem. Being hard is par for the course. It builds patience and lots of good qualities. The mind going back to the issue, it's not an issue again. I mean, you have to see it as, stop thinking of it as an issue and think of it as moments of experience. So what are the experiences? Thoughts, emotions? Look at the hindrances that arise. Don't worry about overcoming things, because problems are things that you overcome. Experiences are not things that you overcome. Experiences are things that you, in a Buddhist context, learn about, study, become familiar with, face and become familiar with. That familiarity is wisdom. Once you're familiar with them, they lose their power over you. They lose the terrifying nature, the frightful nature. They're not so scary once you understand them. They're not so attractive either. We should never try to distract the mind because we're trying to face things. So distracting would be antithetical. Should never stop meditation, of course. If you have the opportunity to meditate, go for it. Don't stop it. There are other things you can do that are supportive, so doing other things is not all bad. You can help other people, you can study the Dhamma, you can teach the Dhamma or share the Dhamma with others. You can even reflect on the Dhamma as a means of changing your attitude towards your problems. If you've got a bad attitude, if you happen to have a bad attitude, Dhamma can help you remind yourself this is not the best way to look at this. Someone's watching from Thailand. Thailand Pond.
Sadhu, Bhante. The next question that we have, Bhante, how do we deal with the unwillingness to pay attention? This unwillingness prevents us from using our energy to even address that very lack of will.
Well, sometimes you've got to roll with it. What you can't do is force yourself to meditate. But what you can do is find the times when you are willing to be mindful and find ways to increase those times or encourage those times. Mindfulness is not something, it's so simple that you can. I mean, you can do it right now. This is a great opportunity because we're talking about the Dhamma. So every one of us right now has an opportunity, special opportunity, because we're distracted from all the things that distract us from the Dhamma. We're focused on the Dhamma during this time. So even if you're just noting your sitting posture, that's a great thing. Most of us are probably sitting right now. You can note sitting. That was easy, right? You don't have to worry about unwillingness, willingness. One thing you can observe is aversion. So when you think about meditating, there might be aversion towards meditating. Right? You can note that aversion as an experience. It's actually quite easy, right? Simple. Disliking, that's it. So, I mean, don't overcomplicate it in your mind in terms of make it into this boogeyman that you have this unwillingness. You don't have unwillingness. It's an arisen thing that arises sometimes. So if it's arising, then you can note it, or you can wait until you're willing. Wait until the unwillingness disappears. We're not going to be willing to meditate all the time. We're not going to be willing to be mindful all the time. It takes practice. It takes mental development to get to that point.
Bhante, the next question. To do the meditation course, you need to be regular, but it seems I can't control it so much. So what's precisely the proximate cause of quote-unquote starting a meditation session? What increases it?
Habit. So you need supportive conditions, like if you're going to plant a seed. If you plant the seed in sand, it doesn't grow. Most seeds don't grow in sand. You need lots of supportive conditions. Putting aside the seed analogy, you also need repetition. You need to do it again and again, and the more you do it, the more it becomes a part of your habit. But it's not just doing mindfulness again and again. You also have to have supportive conditions like the sand versus soil, which are things like being a good person, being kind and charitable, being ethical and moral. Non-Buddhists have a real disadvantage because we weren't even taught about morality. Buddhists often break moral precepts. Buddhist lay people who never meditate often break the precepts, but at least they heard about them. People who grew up not Buddhist often were keen on breaking the precepts, thinking, oh, this is the right way to be, killing and drugs and alcohol and all that. So it can be hard. All of those are a detriment to it's like leaching the nutrients from the soil. Some people are not able to start even the at-home course, which is pretty dire. But it's the case where some people aren't even able to commit to an hour of meditation a day. Which, I mean, an hour sounds like a lot, but what that means is 15 minutes walking, 15 minutes sitting twice a day, which isn't actually a lot. Twice a day, 15 is pretty minimal. But it's a great thing. It can change your life just doing that. Not in most cases going to lead to enlightenment by itself, but it's a real foundation and changes the way you look at the world, for sure. But some people are not able to get to that. Well, I mean, putting it as a requirement for starting the course is helpful. If you know that you're required to do something, hey, I won't even let you do the at-home course unless you're doing an hour a day. That's a kick in the pants that gets you going and help to encourage people to push themselves. So having this kind of external support is helpful as well. Like meaning other people to push you. So if you're in contact with other people who are meditating, or you have this opportunity to do a course that requires you to do so much, makes things a lot easier because it provides motivation. But there's lots of supportive conditions. Even coming here once a week is a supportive thing, right? Coming here will support you for sure. Funny, you Sri Lanka. I'm living in Sri Lanka right now.
Bante, the next question that we have, I heard you say if someone is taking mental health medications, they can't do vipassana meditation. Is this true? I can't stop medication or meditation.
They can do it, but the results are not going to be on the level that we expect. There's not. I would never say don't do meditation just because you're on medication. That's not what I say. Certainly do both, but there are problems with taking medication. Even just taking a placebo, even just taking it as a placebo. Not that they are placebo, but even just the fact that you're taking it is antithetical. And listen to what I have to say to the full before you judge me. It's antithetical to the practice of mindfulness because it's about avoiding the conditions. Now, I understand for many people, they need the medication. I don't refute that. I'm just saying that doesn't negate the fact that it is trying to fix and avoid rather than face the condition. Now, I'm not saying you should stop taking medication and just face your problems. I know that for many people, that's not an option. But that's where you have to get to get, unfortunately, that's what where you have to get to. A person with mental illness shouldn't expect that without being able to address this mental illness mindfully, instead of avoiding it, instead of making it easier to deal with or reducing the impact, until they can face it, until through whatever means they can eventually stop taking medication and actually face, eventually, I'm saying through whatever means. It's antithetical. You can't expect to reasonably do both, or succeed in both. So you should. People on medications should, of course, do meditation. But this isn't just theoretical. I had one student who lied to me, and this isn't the only one, but one student actually lied to me because he knew I wouldn't accept him to do the intensive meditation course while on psychoactive medication. And I couldn't understand why halfway through the course, nothing. Until he said, I was lying. I lied to you. I am taking psychoactive medication. I said, well, that's why it's not working. So sorry. It by taking it, you're avoiding, but you're also putting yourself in disadvantageous position. And again, I'm not trying to dissuade anyone at all from taking psychoactive medication. I'm just saying, technically, or but realistically, in an ultimate sense, it's disadvantageous. It's not allowing you to confront the things you have to confront. And again, I can't say enough that I understand and appreciate that it's necessary. It's just that all it means is you have a longer path. And the theoretical path is to, first step, agree with me, because you may not, but agree with me that there is a path, and you have to find a path to eventually wean yourself off the medication. And that path includes the practice of mindfulness. It includes consultations with doctors. Not me, I'm not a doctor. But if you're committed to taking psychoactive medication until you die, maybe that's true. Maybe it's necessary for you, but I'd be hard pressed to accept that that is a feasible way of gaining deep and profound realization of the Buddha's teaching. So, I mean, there are people, humans, who will never realize the Buddha's teaching, and I don't know if that's this sort of person fits into that category, but it certainly is the case that there are people whose mental condition is not doesn't allow them. But I think people who have to stay on medication their whole life, psychoactive medication their whole lives, most likely fit into that category. Now, that being said, even such people, and I'm thinking more extreme, examples of people who are violent and this sort of thing, people who are psychotic or that sort of thing, doesn't mean that they can't benefit from the practice, and they should practice. And so, to answer your question, no, I don't say such thing. They absolutely should practice. But if you want to get deep and profound realizations, if you want to become enlightened in this life, you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that it doesn't involve eventually weaning yourself off the medication. I've experimented to a limited degree with helping people come off psychoactive medication. I'm not allowed to do that. If I wasn't living in Sri Lanka, a country like Sri Lanka, I could probably get in legal trouble for doing that. So not easy to get to have the opportunity to help people off, but I have, to a limited degree, had success in helping someone wean themselves off of psychoactive medication that they didn't think was possible. They didn't think it was possible, and we're quite impressed that it was possible. So, yeah, weaning yourself off the medication eventually, with the help of the practice of mindfulness, because of course it should lead to improvement. Mindfulness should help improve. It shouldn't be a thing that you take as a medication. It should be a medicine that cures or helps to cure your problems. And slowly learn how to face. And by learn how to, I don't mean you're wrong and you're making a mistake. I'm saying learn, like study. Like take it as a lifelong study to learn how. The hardest thing for everyone to do, to face the things that we don't want to face our experiences. You have to learn. It's a learning that all of us do. It takes time, that takes effort, it takes dedication. But taking medication is not doing that. It prevents you because of the intention to avoid, to fix, to ameliorate the condition. I think the pragmatic approach for most for ordinary situations. Suppose one has anxiety or depression, right? Is to take the medication because you're unable to face these conditions. And slowly, slowly, as you get better at facing them, slowly, slowly, you need less medication. That's the simplistic way of describing what I'm saying. But yeah, I think medication, psychoactive medication, both theoretically and in my experience, from what I've seen, pretty clearly gets in the way, unfortunately. Maybe unfortunately is not the right word, but unavoidably. And you'd be hard pressed to convince me otherwise. It's a hot topic. It's something that has caused a lot of argumentation, people getting upset. I can't avoid saying what I just said. You might disagree, and I know people do disagree, so each their own. And you're certainly welcome to go find someone who says otherwise. No hard feelings.
The next question that we have, Bante: should we always note the following physical sensations after a mental object, such as happy or anger, or just try to go back to the rising?
You should try to go back to the rising, but if there's something distracting you, note it. That's fine. You can note things in succession. But you should always be trying to go back. Don't let yourself just get distracted by thing after thing after thing. It's not, I mean, you don't have to look at it as having a right answer. Like, I must do it this way or I must do it that way. You just have to have general principles. The general principle is to try to go back to the stomach, but if there's something else to note, you don't have to say, no, I was told to go back to the stomach. Note it, that's fine. Just as a general rule, try not to jump from one thing to another to another. At some point you can say, no, I'm going to choose to go back to the stomach, and that's fine, because if it's really distracting, you'll see that, and you'll have to note it eventually anyway. But in the beginning, it's just kind of chaotic, and you just do what you can. And because it's so chaotic, it's helpful to not try to be a perfect meditator and catch everything. It's helpful to just cut your losses, triage, or well, that's not the best word, but kind of triage in the sense of don't try to save everyone, don't try to catch every mind state. Just do what you can, do your best, and have good general principles of trying to go back to the stomach, just because it keeps you focused and keeps you from jumping.
The next question, Bante: sometimes during meditation, I have this experience of my sight appearing to be digital. I always forget to note seeing because I find it interesting. Is this a sign of development and insight?
No, it's just seeing. I mean, I don't quite know what you mean by digital. If you mean you're seeing it arise and cease, then yeah, that's absolutely cultivation of insight. So maybe that's what you're referring to. That could be it. But regardless, you really shouldn't see anything as being a sign of anything. Things are not signs of anything. I mean, they are, but not really. And from the perspective of mindfulness, you don't want to be looking at things as signs. You want to be looking at things as what they are. That's the whole point of noting, to stop you from focusing on signs. Nimitta, the word nimitta means sign. I mean, basically, things have signs or are signs of something. And the Buddha said, do not get caught up in the nimitta. Na nimitta gahi, nanubhyanjana gahi. But you forget to note seeing because you find it interesting, and that's a common problem. But the interesting is the problem, or the finding it interesting is the problem. It means you like it, or you like something about it, or you want something about it, you want to know more about it. There's a craving involved there, liking involved there, and you have to note that. That's a hindrance. As you can see, it's a hindrance to being mindful. And you find it interesting because you think it's good. You think it's, oh, it's a sign of progress. No, that's the problem with seeing things as signs, because you start to like them or dislike them. And then you can't be mindful of them.
The next question, Bante. I have autism, Asperger's, and ADHD, not taking any medication. Meditation helps quite a lot when I can find the motivation for it. Any specific recommendation or instruction, or nothing specific?
Be patient and determined. For most people on the path who take up the practice of Buddhism, they are not going to become enlightened in this life. Most people. Now, if you're one who can, absolutely go for it. But don't be discouraged if you don't see any way forward. That can change in a moment. You can find a way. Your life can change, and suddenly, oh, there's a way forward. But even if there isn't, we are all going forward. Coming here is a step forward. Engaging. Why coming here? Why bragging about what we're doing and saying how great it is? We're discussing the Dhamma. If you don't believe this is Dhamma, well, that's another issue. But we're here to talk about the Dhamma, and as long as we stick to that, this is a great thing that we're doing. Even just coming here, even this frog who heard the Buddha's speech and just knew this is a Buddha speaking. Well, actually didn't know. I was looking at the commentary, and I'm not sure if he knew or didn't know, but there was something about it that was very pure. So if you're doing meditation, and you have the quality of mind that allows you to come here and say it is helping quite a lot, how many people can't even see that? They sit down for 5 minutes and think, oh, this is useless. Or they think about meditation, think, that would be useless. How many people like that? You're not that. You're so far beyond that. You are a person who has practiced meditation and gained benefit from it, seen that benefit, recognized that benefit, and believes in that benefit, has confidence in that benefit. That's quite rare. So keep up the good work. And Don't let your condition drag you down. Yes, you might be in a condition where it takes time. We all are. Even people who become a sotapanna. Sotapanna is like the dream. How many Buddhists wish, make this vow that may someday I become a sotapanna? Even a sotapanna is still going to be born potentially 7 more times, according to the doctrine, according to the Orthodox. 7 more rebirths. I mean, 7 more lives like this, even after they become a sotapanna. For many people, their best hope is to be reborn in the time of the Buddha Maitreya. So there's another Buddha that is prophesied to be coming, that right now he's up in Dusita heaven. I think Dusita, yeah. I think. And it's just waiting for the opportunity. Once he lives out his life there, he will be reborn as a bodhisattva and become a Buddha. And anybody who has the inclination towards the practice of mindfulness, let alone those people who have actually practiced it under this Buddha, anybody who's practiced the Buddha's teaching, who's gained wisdom that you have gained into the nature of reality that allows them to let go and lose their attachment to suffering. It's going to have a very easy time to practice under the next Buddha. There are people now alive in Buddhist societies who make that their goal, who have as their goal to be reborn in the time of Maitreya. It's actually becoming a fairly common thing, or has from time to time become a common thing, where people stop trying to become enlightened in this life and only strive to be reborn, because they figure that they really don't have the potential to be enlightened in this life. That's not really a good attitude. I don't encourage that. Do your best in this life, right? Because even if your best isn't enough, it's not at all for waste. It's never, not one bit of it is wasted. It's all as planting a seed, nourishing that seed, and biding your time for that seed to grow, because it will grow. The opportunity to be reborn in heaven. This is why the talk about heaven is so valuable, because many people in this life will not become even a sotapanna through the practice of mindfulness, but they practiced, and that gave them a connection. And that connection causes them to be reborn in heaven, and not only be reborn in heaven, but be connected to those people who are practicing Buddha's teaching in heaven. There can be anagamis in heaven, people who are very pure, very knowledgeable, very experienced, that you can continue to practice with. So things like that. No recommendation or instruction. I mean, do the at-home course if you haven't. You could even do the at-home course on medication. I'm not preventing people from doing it on medication. That one on medication. Only the intensive course, because the expectation of the intensive course is that you gain deep realization. The at-home course is learning the basics, but you're not taking medication. You're already ahead of the crowd, right? So absolutely, if you haven't done the at-home course, do it. If you've done it, maybe consider to try the intensive course. We have an intensive course on offer. We've got lots of rooms now. Lots of rooms for people if people wanted to come and do an intensive course in mindfulness meditation. I know coming to Sri Lanka might seem daunting, but it's a wonderful country. It's a great place to practice Buddhism. It's my favorite place on earth of all the places I've lived. My favorite place to live. I think it's just so conducive to the practice of the Buddhist teaching and life as a Buddhist, and just a great country. Not to really pump it up. I mean, you can practice anywhere, of course, but don't be discouraged about coming to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka should be a place that people think fondly of when they think about coming to practice Buddhism.
Ante, we have passed the second hour mark, so we will end our session there. Thank
If
you.
your questions didn't get asked, you can come back next time. Try and write your questions early so you can write your questions during the first hour and they will be collected. So anyone who's here during the first hour, you're welcome to write them as soon as you arrive even. If they're in the chat, someone will pick them up and save them for the second hour. So I hope this was helpful. I appreciate this session. Seems like it's exactly what we should be doing, studying texts like this, listening to the words of the Mahasi Sayadaw, and then taking our time to absorb each aspect, each item, not to rush through it, not to read it so we can say we've read it and have liking of the fact that we have learned all this information. No, to really absorb it, reflect on it, and take the time to relate it to our own practice. I think we're doing that. I think it would be good if the people in the voice chat, don't be afraid if you have anything to say. Hopefully in the future more people will be joining as they finish the at-home course. But don't be afraid to speak up, comment even, and certainly ask questions. But I certainly appreciate that you're all here. Without you, this wouldn't happen. It won't happen. I won't read the texts alone. So special thanks to the organizers, Bitsu Delaur, Sanda. I don't know if Austin or Siri Chanda are involved, but whoever's involved, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you everyone for the questions. Appreciate the good questions. And asking good questions is a cause for being reborn wise. People who are born wise because they asked good questions in past lives. Of course, in this life as well, it's a cause for being wise. So keep it up. Keep the questions coming. Don't ever be afraid or worried that your question won't be well received. If it's not well received, that's our problem, not yours. You can ask any question. If it's a thoughtful and a well-intentioned question, it might not get asked, but we'll appreciate it anyway. I appreciate everyone for listening. We've got people on YouTube, people on Discord. I appreciate that you've all come out here. Appreciate the good intentions and the wholesomeness, the effort that has been taken that will be a support for your own practice. The effort that you take to be here for 2 hours, the support in many ways. The support in patience, the support for mindfulness, the support for wisdom, the support for kindness and communal harmony as we come together in harmony without fighting, without arguing, without hating on each other or being conceited or arrogant. We come together with the best of intentions. Lots of good there. So may the power of all that goodness for each and every one of us, and all the goodness any goodness that you've performed in this life and in the past life, which you definitely performed, that allowed you all of us to be reborn as human beings. All of the power of that goodness, along with the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, may it all protect us, keep us free from danger, free from fear, free from enmity, animosity, free from sickness, free from suffering. May it allow us to support us to progress on the path and strengthen our minds and strengthen our mental faculties so that we might gain mindfulness and wisdom, that we might free ourselves from the attachments to those things that cannot possibly bring us happiness, and find true peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
Bhante.
sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you for sharing profound Dhamma with us, Bhante.